You sure? The villa, SUV, and your entire vacation are all booked under my name.
That the airline employee looked uncomfortable as she studied the screen in front of her. Then she looked up at me and quietly explained that my reservation had been cancelled online less than an hour earlier. By the same person who had originally booked the ticket. That person was my father. Only 10 minutes earlier, Dad had dropped me at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. He had smiled, wished me a good flight, and driven away as if everything were normal. My family was supposed to be flying together to California to celebrate my mother's 60th birthday. Yet when I arrived at the counter, everyone else still had a seat except me. I called Dad, but he did not answer. Mom ignored my call too. So did my brother Evan and my sister Chloe. Then my phone vibrated. It was a message from Dad containing only 2 words, walk home. At first, I could hardly believe what I was reading. This was not an accident, a computer error, or a misunderstanding. My family had deliberately left me at the airport. They were already driving toward their own terminal, planning to enjoy a vacation that I had helped arrange. The reason became obvious almost immediately. 2 weeks earlier, Dad had asked me to co-sign a high-interest business loan. He owned Parker Sceneworks, a commercial sign company, and wanted to expand it. His company could not qualify for the loan on its own, so the lender wanted my income and credit attached to the application. The monthly payment would have been higher than my mortgage, and Dad's finances were already unstable. If his expansion failed, I could have been responsible for a crushing debt. I refused. Dad called me selfish. He said successful children were supposed to help their parents. I reminded him that I had already been helping the family for years. I had paid part of Chloe's respiratory therapy tuition, covered payments on Dad's company truck, helped my parents with property taxes, and placed a deposit on equipment for Evan's planned bicycle repair business. But guaranteeing a risky loan was different. It could destroy my finances, so my answer remained no. Apparently, canceling my plane ticket was Dad's punishment. He wanted to frighten and humiliate me until I became cooperative again. Standing in the airport, however, I suddenly remembered something he seemed to have forgotten. Although Dad had booked the airline tickets, I had reimbursed him for my seat. More importantly, I had personally booked and paid for the family's vacation house in Carmel, the 7-seat rental SUV, and a prepaid coastal tour. Every reservation was still under my name. I opened the travel app on my phone, stared at the booking details, and laughed. Then I replied to Dad, "You sure?" 5 minutes later, the SUV carrying my family came racing back toward the airport. Dad called repeatedly, but by then I was already in a rideshare heading away from the terminal. I ignored all 11 calls. Because the reservations were still refundable, I canceled the vacation house and the rental SUV. I converted the coastal tour into future travel credit. I did not touch anyone else's airline ticket or take back money that belonged to them. I simply canceled the services that I had booked and paid for myself. Then I called my Aunt Renee. Her first question changed everything. She asked whether Dad had canceled my ticket because I refused to guarantee his loan. Until that moment, a part of me still wanted to believe he had acted impulsively. Renee told me the truth 2 days before the trip. Dad had described his plan to her. He said I needed to remember who had helped me become successful. By taking away some family warmth, he believed he could pressure me into signing the loan papers. This was not a joke or a moment of anger. It was a planned act of manipulation. That realization forced me to look honestly at my entire relationship with my family. For almost 4 years, I had quietly filled the gap between what they earned and the lifestyle they wanted. Whenever they needed money, I was considered generous and responsible. Whenever I asked questions, set a limit, or requested a budget, they called me controlling. My money was never too controlling for them to accept. So I opened my banking app. Chloe's next tuition installment was voluntary, and I canceled it. Dad's truck payment was voluntary, and I stopped it. Future help with my parents' property taxes was a gift, and I ended it. Evan's equipment deposit was refundable, so I requested the refund. I did not reverse any completed gift. I did not enter anyone else's account. I simply stopped volunteering my income to people who had deliberately abandoned me. Dad finally left a voicemail. He said the airport incident was supposed to make me less controlling and ordered me to restore the vacation reservations. Mom sent a message too. She did not ask whether I was safe or how I would get home. She only asked me to restore the rental house before their flight departed. I answered with one word, no. They boarded the plane anyway, believing I would calm down before they reached California. Instead, they arrived to discover that their house, SUV, and tour were gone. They spent a miserable night in an overpriced hotel near San Jose and flew back to Washington the next morning. Dad immediately began rewriting the story. He told relatives that I had destroyed Mom's birthday over a harmless joke. Mom claimed I had humiliated the family, and nobody mentioned that Dad had intentionally canceled a ticket I had already paid for, left me at a different airport entrance, and ignored my calls. 3 days later, Chloe contacted me, not to apologize, but to complain that her college payment was missing. She assumed I had entered the wrong date and demanded that I fix it before registration closed. I told her there was no mistake. I had ended all voluntary family payments. She called immediately and insisted that she had not canceled my ticket. I agreed, but asked why she had boarded the plane after discovering what Dad had done. After a long silence, Chloe admitted that Dad had told everyone I needed to be humbled. She had felt uncomfortable, but she did not want to challenge him, because she needed me to continue paying her tuition. In other words, she knew I was being punished, remained silent, and still expected my financial support. I sent her information about scholarships, emergency grants, payment plans, and hospital sponsorship programs. Her main complaint was that they required applications, essays, and paperwork. That response revealed the real problem. She did not want help becoming independent. She wanted easy access to my money. Evan called next. The supplier had released the equipment and van reservation for his business after I withdrew my deposit. He accused me of breaking a promise. I reminded him that the promise had been made before he helped leave me at the airport. He blamed Dad, but I had heard Evan laughing in the background of one of the voicemails. Later that day, Dad called from the dealership because the automatic payment on his company truck had failed. He warned that losing the vehicle could cost him jobs. I replied that the truck belonged to his business, not to me. He demanded one final payment. I refused. Soon, relatives began contacting me with wildly different versions of the story. One uncle believed I had thrown a tantrum over an airline error. A cousin thought I was intentionally destroying Chloe's education. Someone else had been told I canceled Mom's vacation because I wanted attention. Aunt Renee sent screenshots from a family group chat that excluded me. Dad described me as emotionally unstable and claimed I used money to control everyone. A mom said she was worried I was not myself. Evan said I had ruined his future, while Chloe allowed the lies to spread without correcting them. I wanted to expose everything immediately, but I chose a calmer approach. I created a timeline. I saved Dad's airport message, the receipt proving I had reimbursed him for my ticket, the cancellation records, the voicemails, and every demand sent afterward. Then Dad invited the extended family to dinner at a waterfront restaurant in Tacoma. He announced that we would settle this like adults, and told me to bring the bills. I understood his plan. He wanted to place 4 emergencies in front of me at once: Chloe's tuition, his company truck, my parents' property taxes, and Evan's business equipment. If I refused in front of everyone, he hoped I would appear heartless. I agreed to attend on one condition: Aunt Renee would come too. Dad hesitated for nearly an hour before accepting. He knew Renee could expose the truth. At the restaurant, stacks of financial documents covered the table. Before I even sat down, Dad admitted that the airport lesson had gone too far, but he blamed me for reacting dramatically. Mom described the terrible hotel and ruined birthday trip. Chloe pushed tuition notices toward me. Evan showed me pictures of the van he wanted. Dad placed his truck statement and property tax schedule in front of me. Not one person asked how I felt. Nobody apologized. They only wanted the money restored. I took out my phone and read Dad's message aloud. Walk home. He dismissed it as something said in anger. I pointed out that he had canceled the ticket before dropping me off, and had deliberately left me at another entrance so he could escape before I reached the counter. That required planning. Then Renee spoke. She told everyone that Dad had explained his plan to her 2 days before the trip. The room went silent. Dad tried to say he had only been venting, but Renee repeated what he had told her. He intended to exclude me from the vacation because I refused to guarantee his loan. He expected me to panic, buy another ticket, meet them in California, forgive them, and eventually sign the paperwork. A mom finally admitted that she knew about the lesson. Even confessed that Dad had promised I would cool off before their plane landed. Then Chloe said something even more painful. She assumed I would forgive them because I always did. That sentence made everything clear. They did not believe their behavior was harmless. They believed I was predictable. They thought they could hurt me temporarily because I would continue supporting them permanently. I placed a financial ledger on the table. It listed years of tuition payments, truck transfers, a property tax assistance, repairs, insurance deductibles, travel expenses, and business deposits. I was not demanding repayment. The ledger existed because Dad had been telling relatives that he carried the family and that my help was occasional. The numbers proved the opposite. Dad's face turned red. He threatened to exclude me from future family gatherings. I calmly told him that he had already used belonging as leverage at the airport, and it no longer worked. Then I placed copies of the cancelled payment notices beside their bills. My decisions were final. Outside, Chloe begged me to separate her tuition from Dad's behavior. I reminded her that boarding the plane had been her decision. I gave her a list of scholarships and financial aid contacts. She complained again about the work involved. That night, Evan warned me that Dad planned to confront me at my office. I forwarded the message to building security. When Dad and Mom arrived claiming there was a family emergency, I met them in the lobby with a security officer nearby. Dad's first demand was that I make the truck payment that day. Mom warned that they might fall behind on property taxes. I offered practical alternatives: reduce expenses, sell unused property, or arrange a payment plan. They refused to leave without money, so security escorted them outside. By lunchtime, relatives had heard another distorted story, that I had thrown my desperate parents out. This time, I did not chase every rumor. I sent one factual statement to the family group. I explained that my ticket had been deliberately cancelled to punish me for rejecting a business loan, that I had ended voluntary payments from my accounts, and that I had taken nothing from anyone. Then I stopped defending myself. Reality soon accomplished what arguments could not. Evan kept his sporting goods job and began repairing bicycles on weekends with rented tools. Chloe applied for financial aid, worked extra shifts at a rehabilitation center, and remained in school, although her graduation was delayed. Dad returned the expensive truck and rented vehicles only when jobs required them. Parker Singworks became smaller, but it survived. Mom increased her work hours. My parents sold a recreational trailer, canceled subscriptions, postponed a kitchen renovation, and ate out less often. Nobody became homeless. No future was destroyed. They simply began living on their real income. For the first time, I understood that I had been the invisible difference between what my family earned and what they believed they deserved. Weeks later, Dad organized another birthday dinner for Mom and falsely told relatives that I planned to apologize publicly and restore every payment. When I arrived with Renee, people actually applauded, believing I had finally surrendered. I remained standing and corrected the lie. I had not apologized and I had restored nothing. Renee again described Dad's plan. Then Mom made a revealing confession. She said she had wanted me to feel dependent on the family because I acted as if I never needed anyone. There it was, the truth. My parents had tried to make the daughter funding their lives feel powerless. I opened a sealed folder containing the airport record, my reimbursement receipt, Dad's message, the workplace warning, screenshots of the rumors, and confirmation that every recurring payment had ended. At the final page established my new boundaries: no personal calls, no unannounced visits, and no social media contact. One email address would remain available only for necessary administrative matters. Dad declared that I was no longer his daughter. I told him he had been using family belonging as a threat since the airport, and that it no longer controlled me. Mom followed me into the parking lot, said she missed me, blamed Dad's pride, and then asked whether I could at least pay the next property tax installment. I said no. After that, I blocked their personal numbers, updated my emergency contacts and important documents, and removed every informal authorization I had once given family members. And something unexpected happened: nothing collapsed. Dad kept his business, abandoned the dangerous expansion loan, and learned to operate without my credit. Chloe eventually finished her program after a one-semester delay. Evan slowly built a modest repair business using money he earned himself. Mom adjusted to working more hours. Meanwhile, I discovered how much invisible labor I had performed beyond writing checks, tracking deadlines, comparing loans, reviewing contracts, making calls, and rescuing everyone from emergencies. 4 months after the airport incident, Dad appeared outside my apartment and announced that the family had suffered enough. I asked him a simple question, knowing everything his decision had cost. Would he cancel my ticket again? He avoided answering. He said he would handle things differently, but he still could not admit that what he had done was wrong. He invited me to Sunday dinner and warned that I might regret having nobody when I eventually needed help. I told him that needing support was not the same as accepting disrespect. Then I asked him not to return. Several months later, I finally took the California trip by myself. I stayed near Monterey, ate wherever I wanted, stopped along the coast whenever the ocean caught my attention, and woke each morning without anyone asking which expense I planned to cover next. At sunset one evening, I remembered standing alone at the airport and reading Dad's cruel message. For years, I had believed home meant the people whose bills I paid, whose deadlines I remembered, and whose crises I quietly carried. But my father's attempt to make me feel dependent revealed the opposite truth. My family depended on my money, my credit, my forgiveness, and my willingness to accept disrespect without consequences. I never restored the payments. I never returned to Sunday dinner, and I stopped treating financial demands disguised as apologies as proof of love. They told me to walk home, so I did. I simply chose a new home, one built on peace, self-respect, and boundaries, where none of them had a key.